Welkom op een bijzondere dag, want met elkaar samenkomen is lang niet vanzelfsprekend gebleken. Dus hartstikke leuk dat we dat nu kunnen doen. En we hebben gedurende de afgelopen 1,5 jaar ook wel leren waarderen hoe belangrijk contact, menselijke relaties en ook het met elkaar fysiek samenkomen is. Heel kort, wat gaan we doen? Uiteraard gaan we natuurlijk verbinden. En verbinden doe je door met elkaar in gesprek te gaan, onder andere. Dus dit wordt een hele interactieve dag. Ik weet niet of jullie daar een beetje op hadden voorbereid, maar dat gaat het echt wel worden. Dus jongens, energie erin. En dan zal Koen Jolie jullie op een verrassende manier laten verbinden. En dan zijn er een aantal workshops waarvoor jullie allemaal hebben opgegeven. Zo zijn er Cora en Mirko als gelegenheidsduo, dus daar vindt ook al een verbinding plaats. Dus Theo en Ann verzorgen een workshop. Dan komt Ton Luhena Pessi van de Nationale Politie fantastische dingen vertellen over het verbinden met anderen, noem ik het maar even gemakshalve. Please let me introduce to you Professor Avi Kluger from Hebrew University in Jerusalem. He's studying and researching the essential skill of listening. He's really going to do a mix of, let's say, presenting and interaction. And as I understood correctly, he wants you to experience not only the art of listening, but also how it feels to being listened to, being heard. So, I think we'll have a scoop, isn't it right? Is this your first, no? Some sort of. So if you all are ready, please welcome Professor Avi Kluger.
Thank you. I want to start with my conclusion. By the end of my talk, I hope that you will agree with me that 1 equals 2. And I first have to start with what is listening. And the truth is it's extremely hard to define. And there are over 50 different definitions in the literature, what it is. And my understanding of it, based on Carl Rogers, that listening could be seen from 3 different perspectives. From what I do when I listen, what other people can see when I listen, and what the speaker experiences. So here I put what the listener is actually doing inside. Nobody can see it completely. Is your full attention is on the other person. And if it's not 100%, the miracle that I'm going to talk about do not happen. And do you understand the other person, including emotionally? And finally, are you really trying to be on the side of the person that you're listening to, without criticism, non-judgmental, as Carl Rogers called it, with empathy? But I think deeper than that, in one of the pieces of research that I'm doing now, when you're listening, do you believe that the other person will solve his own issues or will learn something new for himself without any advice from you, without anything, just from you listening and perhaps asking questions? And when this happens, the beauty of listening happens. It's easier to explain what behaviors people see when they know that a person is not listening to them. That is, when you nod in your head, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but you play with your phone, everybody knows that you're not listening. And when I cut onions in my kitchen and I talk to my son, I can arrange with him when he's going to come home, but I cannot have the deep conversation about his career or his struggles with finding a girlfriend. And when you hear the click of the computer on the phone, you know that the other person is not with you. And when you say, I know what you mean, you know that the person does not know what you mean. They're just saying, it's my turn to talk. And when you say to your children or other people, but I've told you 1,000 times, It's a sure sign that you are intending to tell for the 1001 time, which will not change anything, and you don't stop to ask and to listen to why things are not working the way you would hope they would. And when you give advice before anyone asks you to do, this is a sure sign for the speaker that you're not listening. I'm not saying that advice cannot be useful, but in very later stages when you really got the framework of the other person and you don't give advice, you ask whether this would help them or not, with curiosity, not with ordering. And Israelis are very quick to say, I know, I'll tell you what you should do. I didn't ask you. And if you feel like this when you're listening, you say, I can strangle this person, I can choke them, you're not in a position to listen. And I think this happens to everyone, that the person just irritates you to a degree that it's impossible. And the only solution, if you want to decide to listen, is to surrender, sit back until you calm down, and try to see what emotions from the other person is irritating you so much. So, let me see what, not academicians, but practitioners are saying about listening as I described it. Stephen Covey, in the most sold management book ever, one of the habits of highly effective people is seek to understand before you seek to be understood. Yesterday evening I met for dinner a colleague of mine who is doing workshops on listening, and she said she started to learn it from a boss of hers that always first ask her what she has to say. Never spoke before employees, completely describe what they think. A habit of successful people. In a different domain, Harville Hendricks, in Getting the Love You Want, how to fix broken marriages, and he basically tells us that all of us in our childhood build an image, and hence the imagotherapy, if you have heard about it, an image of the people who took care of us as children. It's unconscious, and when we become mature sexually, we start to look in the world for a partner that will remind us this image that psychological image that we carry inside. And the more the person is similar to this image, the stronger is the impact of a dangerous drug that the brain produces. It's called love. So we fall in love with a person that resonates with this image. What we are not aware while we are falling in love is that the content of this image is mostly of the unresolved issues from our childhood. So under the influence of a drug, we connect to a person that if we were sane at that moment, we will not get with 3 meters close to this person under no circumstance. We just keep our distance. But the drug does it. But the influence of this drug is short-lived. It's between half a year and 3 years, and then the influence is gone. And then we wake up, and sometimes there is a baby already screaming in the crib. And we see this thing that we thought was either the prince or the princess, or the knight on the white horse or the princess, and we said, no, this is the devil next to me. But now, what shall I do? And Harville Hendricks is telling us the only hope is to learn to listen to the other person. There's a little trick in this advice. It's very easy to say, but what my wife wants to tell me about me, it's exactly the last thing in the world that I'm willing to cope with. For my own well-being. So there are no shortcuts, but to learning the skill of listening. Now, in another beautiful book, 40 years old and still being sold, and I recommend it because there are experiments showing that training parents with this technique improve the way their teenagers perceive their parents. And if any time you ask a child or grandchild, how was it in kindergarten, in school, and you got the elaborate answer, great, fun, good. You're invited to read this book and to see how, as parents, we train our children not to listen to us and not to tell us anything. And the child comes home and said, Dad, somebody beat me in school. And Dad says, who did it? Wait, where is the telephone number of the teacher? I will not allow this thing. Not the teacher. I want the telephone of the principal. Where is it? The child got the lesson. Next day he goes to school. He's getting beaten twice as much. Comes back home. Dad asks, so how was school? It was great. The child doesn't want the embarrassment in front of his kids, and that's the end of story. Now, those authors are asking the parents what would have happened if instead of asking the telephone, you would say to the child, so what happened? Perhaps the child would say, he beat me. And what happened before that? I spat at him. Why did you do that? Well, he did this to me. And what? Well, Dad, you know, I called him names that I don't dare repeat to you. Okay, so what do you think doing next? So the child may say, no, Dad, maybe with this child I should keep my mouth and you don't use dirty language. And then if you'll be quiet for a few more minutes, maybe the child, the wisdom of the child will say, Dad, you know, I shouldn't use these words at all. But we don't give it a chance to happen. It takes only a few minutes. We rush to save our children and not communicate and build their ability to cope with their own world. Moving to a different world, coming from Harvard negotiations program, excellent book, Difficult Conversations. Towards the end of this book, these experts are saying, if you want to become a really good negotiator, you'll have to learn to become a good listening leader. A listening leader hears more than is being said, and I'll give you an example that resonates with me. In my family, there is a way of complaining, said, don't you think that you just exaggerated now? This is too much what you've done? And a listening leader knows that nobody asked him a question. They just complained about his behavior. And if I answer this question, whether yes or no, I'm in trouble. But if I understand that people are upset with me, I can say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Or, I'm sorry, I failed to understand what is so upsetting. Would you help me understand? And again, it's so easy to say, and it's hard to learn the skill, but it's possible. And then, in a different domain completely from psychiatry, as American psychiatrist Jonathan Shea is asking the question, how can it be that 300,000 Americans, soldiers, came back from Vietnam with mental diseases? What happened and what can you do? And his answer is that mental disturbances are the results of betrayal of trust. And in World War II, the American officers were in the front. In Vietnam, the officers were hiding behind and sending the soldiers ahead, because nobody understood exactly what they're doing there. So it's the president who betrayed the army, and the top brass betrayed their units, and they were sending the soldiers to who knows what. Now, the world of a soldier, say Marines, that learned in Texas in boot camp, all for one and one for all, and then he goes to Vietnam, and then he realized that his platoon is in the most dangerous place and they're never being replaced. And that the officer sends his friend to do the day of among the soldiers to do the day patrol, and he and his buddy get always the night patrols. And he go on the night patrol, and his friend goes on a mine and get killed next to him. This person is now alone in the world, not trusting a single person. And they lose it, they go berserk. They come back to the camp and are bereaving for their friend. And they are being told, go medicate yourself. Meaning take half a bottle of whiskey and don't bother us with your trouble. So soldiers like this then come home and tell a story that for Christmas they decorated the trees with dead bodies of Viet Cong. And the civilians are saying, are you crazy? Is this what you're doing under the name of the American flag? And that's another betrayal, that people who never been in their shoes are judging them. And Jonathan Shea, as a psychiatrist, saying the only way to save the souls of these people, to prevent them to become drunkards who beat their wives and their children and pass the trauma to the next generation, is just to listen to their story. Not to tell them, oh, you have PTSD, you have the... Not what you have. What happened? What is your story? And listen, and you heal. In a different domain, many of you may know Edgar Schein as consultants, like the guru or like the person who invented the field of organizational consulting. And he's writing a few years ago, when he's 83 years old, what he seems to have learned from his career. And the title tells it all. Humble inquiry. That's for me consulting. The gentle art of asking instead of telling. And the list goes on and on. Leanna Wen, a physician from Harvard, you may see her on the New York Times and CNN, often talking now about the COVID. She's telling families, doctors don't listen, and that is a risk factor for your family members. It's the third most frequent cause of death in the US is malpractice. The third. And she's basically telling them, don't assume that the doctor asked all the right questions. Ask him, why did you give this test? Why is that? And be rude to save the life of your loved ones. Whatever it takes to make them listen. On the other side of it, another physician from New York, Daniel Ofri, tells doctors, when you don't listen, you're really betraying the Hippocrates oath. And she gave me an example of a patient coming to her office and having diabetes, and she gives her diet. And she comes again and again, and she sees that her glucose level don't go down. She says, what's going on? Please tell me. If I told you, if you don't, it doesn't go down, you'll be amputated, you would lose a leg. And the lady told her, well, every time I come back out from your office, I go and buy the food you recommend. But I don't have enough money, and when I'm running out of money, I'm buying the junk food until my next salary comes in. Now the doctor tells me, from the hospital point of view, I'm an excellent doctor. I did all the checks, what I'm supposed to tell her. But I'm a terrible doctor for asking her that, wasting the hospital time. But only by figuring that and finding a social worker and helping her deal with finances, seeing the entire person, that I have hope to heal her. So listening is part of medicine, and many doctors still don't know it. So these are just a few examples of what practitioners are saying. So let's see what the theoreticians are saying. First, I'm sorry I have so little time. I have a lot to tell, but I'll stick to the most important thing. First, Monisha Pashupathy from Utah is telling us already 20 years ago, and Bavalas from Vancouver, that the listeners shape the quality of the speech of the speaker. And a poor listener will make you stutter, will make increase your speech disfluencies, like am, and a good listener make you talk fluently. And that was demonstrated in experiments in the laboratory. Then Pashupati took it one step ahead and said, if I ask you, if you tell a story, and I listen well to your story, then the experience you told me about, which you have in your episodic memory, will go into your semantic memory. And then it becomes part of your self-identity. But if I don't listen to you, it doesn't go to your identity. So I'm a young child at home, going and said, Dad, today in the kindergarten, we pressed on grapes, we're gonna make wine in the kindergarten. And Dad says, note now, you need to take a shower, we need to have dinner later. What the child will remember, according to the theoretician, is that he hates making wine. Because what you remember is not what happened to you. You remember what happened to you when you shared your experience. And such, in a very unnoticed, subtle way, the collection of the listener around us shape our identity. Those of you who are old enough to remember a cartoon of Popeye, he was singing, I am who I am, I am who I am. No, you're not you are who you are. You are who all the people around you heard from you. This is what you are becoming to be. And it's hard to believe it, that the people around us shape our identity. So this is a really extreme theoretical argument that the listeners in collections slowly shape identity. If this is not extreme enough for you, Carl Rogers 70 years ago is writing in Client-Centered Therapy, 1951, that listening of the type that I'm describing could make a person discover inside of him or her parts that they never recognize. Scary parts. And they may come into their consciousness and to the way they present themselves to the world. And he said it's so strong that it could change personality. Now, had you tell me that you can do something to change personality, I would laugh in your face. But it happened to me. And then in sociology, anthropology, people are saying that when you listen to people, you change political atmosphere and tone. And you just have to think about the Me Too movement finally giving a loudspeaker to little tiny voices that were suppressed maybe through the evolution and make them into a political force. So that's the power of listening. Now, so far I told you stories, but I'm a person mostly of numbers. So let me show you what, before I go to numbers, this is what I promised. I'm just worried about the time all the time. This is what's going to be published in January. This is my understanding of how does it happen and how listening really affects people. A person, let's call the person I, suddenly pays attention that person J listens to them. So when they feel that, they start to feel psychologically safe. Their tension goes down. When they start to feel safe, they start to tell more authentic things. Perhaps it happened to a few of you that you told today a story that you never shared before. And when you start to talk about authentic things, the listener will become even better listener, because when you talk from your heart, then it's very easy to listen. and we just practice it with the stories in the exercise. Tell me something interesting about the history of the family. I made a mistake and it took 6 minutes. I said, 6 minutes are up, you don't feel it because you are mesmerized. Because the identity is invited to the stage and it just happens. So then it started to create a vicious positive circle, and so it's not vicious, a positive spiral, that the listener now feels that the other person is really listening, the speaker really listening to them. So they start to talk more, they feel safer and tell more and more meaningful things. And then I go to the B panel. At a certain point, it's no longer one person or the other. Something is being created between two minds that becomes a property of a dancing diet. It's the dancers, it's the dance, no longer one or two. And Martin Buber called it I-thou, Emmanuel Levinas called it encounter. I call it a sense of togetherness, and other people also call it togetherness. And in this space, what I hypothesize that happens is that our mind is free to collaborate divergently, to discover new things about ourselves, about the other person. It could be a talk about childhood trauma. It could be a talk about a programming technique, that a trick or something that will rise between two people who are talking about some ideas like that. Now, what I also hypothesize that this moment is short-lived, it's an episode. The reason it's a short episode is that we cannot tolerate it for a long time. You can think about sex, it could be very nice, but at a certain point, enough is enough. Just keep the distance because we cannot take it anymore. And the reason is, I think Carl Rogers understood it, this state is a state of constant fluidity and change. And there is a limit to how much we can change in a given time. So we need to change a little bit and rest. And for the rest, we separate from the other person, but we emerge from this conversation with clarity about the thing we were talking, with novel plans, with better well-being for a variety of reasons, and a new attachment or a stronger attachment with the person who allowed this episode to happen. And this is what I will be testing and working on in the next 5 years or so. But, wow, what's the time is flying. When I was a child, I collected stamps and I organized them, stamps from Israel, stamps from Monaco, stamps from the Netherlands. So I had stamps. I didn't change this hobby that much. Today I collect papers about listening and I organize them by topic. Listening and relationship, listening and performance, listening and leadership, listening and. So this is the work that I've done and did not publish based on 272 papers with more than 900 relationship of listening and I'm going to show you the results on a scale that everything is converted to strength of relationship using the correlation coefficient. For those of you not familiar with it, it's a measure of strength of relationship. It ranges between -1 and +1. Minus means negative relationship, and plus positive relationship. And I put here a way to compare whatever I'm going to show you. 0.21 is the average of about 25,000 experiments carried out in social psychology throughout the 20th century. This is what social psychologists know to do. Like, when you manipulate one thing, you see what's the result. That's the average correlation. It's not much, but that's what we know what to do. Point 26 is the average in my field of applied psychology of correlations published in the top 3 journals in the field. Anything above it, it's the top third of the correlation, should be considered strong effects relative to what we know. So the theory that I showed you before, what's the relationship between listening and speech quality? Well, the correlation, including its confidence interval, is so high that there is no need to do more experiments. It's proven. Listening does improve speech quality. Then, does it affect things like trust, relationship, trust between the physician and patient, between customer and salesperson, between subordinates and a boss? No question about it. Part of this is about also relationship, perception of people leadership. It's there. Actually, with people leadership, it's so strong. When I talk to leadership experts, they are stunned to see that listening is such an important component of leadership. Not the speaking, it's also one, but the listening. And does listening affect cognition? Experiments from my lab and other places, like I'll give you an example. Testing ideas of Carl Rogers. We asked people to read a Supreme Court decision to give the bodies of dead terrorists to their Palestinian families back. Usually it's a problem because the funerals of those people starts a new wave of thousands of people attend and start a new wave of violence. I let people first answer whether they are leftist or rightist, read the Supreme Court decision, and talk for 10 minutes to a partner what they think about this decision. After they talk for 10 minutes, I ask them to rate the Supreme Court decision, ignore all the negative aspect of it, how positive it is. And then I told them, ignore all the positive aspect of it, how negative it is. And based on that, I can calculate for every person how complex is their attitude, how much they are willing to tolerate the idea that there are some good things and some bad things, or whether they are one-sided, they see only it's good or only it's bad. Now, the speaker, the listener, in one condition we told them, listen like you listen to a good friend. We did also in the other condition. However, in the experimental condition, behind the speaker, suppose you speak to me, behind you I put 5 computer screens, flickering black and white. That's it. So I'm the listener, but I'm like as if the television is in the room while I'm listening. And we found out that the opinions of the people, because of the flickering screens, were more extreme, either to the left or to the right. But for people who did not have good listener, opinions became more moderate, regardless of whether they are leftist or rightist. So listening, and when I watch television anchors and journalists in all the West, they are looking where to find the politician, and it seems like, let's create blood here on the stage. I think they contribute to the dangerous world we live in. And then, like Roger thought that listening itself cures a lot of mental health issues. Is it true? Well, it seems like it's an average effect, but I want to tell you that I looked at the best pharmaceutical drug for depression. None of them is as strong as listening. And then, does it predict work performance? Doesn't look like much. There is no personality trait known that can predict performance better than listening. So then the questions come, so what affects listening? How do you produce it? Is it something that is trainable? or affected by distractions like televisions? Or is it a personality? Well, the effect of the environment, including training, seems to be strong. The effect of personality is there. For example, women listen on average better than men, and people with agreeable personality are considered better listener. But it's not selecting better listener to the organization, it's training better people listening for your organization. I'm going to skip all of this. Just want to say it, you don't have to brush all your teeth, just the ones you want to keep. And similarly, you don't have to listen to all your employees, customers, and colleagues, just the ones who want to trust you and follow you with their hearts. And I hope that I convince you that one good listener creates two people with plenty of benefits. The good listener is a better performer. The speaker has more moderate cognitions and better well-being. Actually, the listener too. I'm not going to talk about what you can do about it. I'm going to skip, and just tell you my motto is, it's good that we are in a cloister. I'm going to cite from the Old Testament. I'll say it first in Hebrew. מים עמוקים, עצה ולב איש, ואיש תבונה ידלנה. Once a rabbi was asked, how comes that everyone that asks for your advice come out so happy? He said, I read in the book of Proverbs. So they said, what did you read? He said, deep counsel in the heart of man is like deep waters, but men of understanding will draw it out. So they said, so what did you read? He said, every one of us have counsel to the problems that we have right now. And the value of this counsel is like deep water. And deep water should be understood in the context of the Holy Land, where we have dry summers. So if you don't have a well or a cistern, you'll die. So deep water is a well that it's a source of life. And the counsel that you have in your heart is a source of life. But a man of understanding or a person of understanding will draw it out. This is the listener. When you just listen to the other person, you create the space in which this life, source of life, is coming out and the counsel is being revealed. This is in brief what I wanted to say, and because we have very little time left, I would like to ask Florent, are we still going to be hung if we are not finishing exactly at 12:15?
Well, there's so strict logistics here.
So we will finish at 12.
As well, so.
I don't. I'm not arguing with the rules of the divine. I will ask one of two of you to share with us a thought of the following thing. It's all well and nice, but it's not going to work in this or that circumstances. Is there anyone who could share such a thought?
How do we manage also the different needs and the different abilities and capacities to stay together in that moment? So, to apply it, I might be very willing to listen to you right now, to connect with you, but at one point I'm just depleted. So I actually have a need for myself to withdraw and to have rest. And your needs to be listened to is not met yet. I have revealed what is deep in my heart and where I need you to listen to. How do we deal with that?
I learned to be honest and to say, I'm sorry, I can't listen to you right now. I can't. And it builds relationship. And I learned when my family members walk into the room when I'm working on my computer, I make a decision. Am I going to listen to them now, yes or no? If yes, I turn my chair, no computer, I'm with you. If no, I'm saying I'm sorry, not now. And I think it turns a practice to say, I can't do it now, let's make a time and I'll prepare the energy for that if it's important for me. And I think this is part of the thing that I'm teaching good listeners admit that they can't right now.
Me, with all my emotions, with all my anger perhaps, or my happiness from that day, I take it with me when I'm listening. So, in my experience, I think it's intervening with really good listening sometimes, and how can I deal with that?
So my answer is surrender. And I gave you an example that sometimes you feel like, I want to kill this person. A teacher came to my office at the university. She was supposed to teach for me in 2 days' time. And she was sitting there and talking and talking and talking, and I felt like I want to remove her, like I want to remove a fly from my hand. Just get out of here. And when I recognize that this is how I feel, I physically go like this in my chair and stop listening to what she says and start to pay attention to what's happening in my body. And I notice anxiety. I notice tension. And then I give it words with a guess. So I told her, I suspect that you're a little bit anxious or afraid of going to class in 2 days. When I said that, she had a huge smile on her face and said, yes, but I will cope with it. She was saying a few more things and got up and left. She just needed somebody to understand her emotions. And I think that a lot of time the depletion comes from that the other person is not telling us what really they need from us. And they don't know what they really need for us. I was talking about my theory about authenticity. They're not authentic in what they're saying, but they don't know the thing they need. So I have to do the job. And I trusted that when I give up, my body will tell me. But it's something to cultivate and to fail many times before you can do it and enjoy it. I'm working with a researcher of charisma, and I'm thinking that by inviting people to tell story, this is my hypothesis, you make them charismatic. And if you work with developing leaders, this is one thing that you can give them, tell me more story. And then they will be able to use their stories in a way that really makes an impact on followers. And now the judge said, time is up. Dank je wel. Thank you.
Avi, thank you very much. You've been most kind of bringing us some delicacies from Israel.
Yes.
You are aware that the Netherlands has the largest port and trading for cocoa in the world.
Yeah.
Luckily for you, though, this is a joint effort with our Belgian friends.
You have the best pralines, eh?
From my childhood memory, my dad used to be often to Brussels for work, and he always brought this big box of Leonidas bonbons, which I'm handing to you as a symbolic gift, because we think this might be something you get into the plane.
This will make my wife agree for me traveling again.
Don't eat them all.
Yeah, she'll agree for another trip to the Netherlands.
But thank you very much for coming, and well, let's agree to stay in touch with all of you.
Thank you very much.